The shop structure, built back in 1988 as a two-partner general partnership, was never designed to allow a second generation to inherit shares automatically. Nobody set it up that way. No additional equity classes had ever been created. No operating agreement ever mentioned children or grandchildren. The family never drafted a buy-sell addendum that would allow descendants to purchase or claim future equity. When Pawn Stars became a global hit, restructuring the business might have been possible, but the whirlwind of filming schedules and licensing deals pushed those conversations aside. There was always something more urgent happening. Then came another barrier that nobody talks about much. Nevada's pawn licensing laws are no joke. The moment a new equity partner gets introduced, the entire license has to be reevaluated. Every owner has to undergo strict background checks, financial audits, and federal anti-money laundering compliance. For a business as heavily regulated as a pawn shop operating on Las Vegas Boulevard, even adding a 1% owner could trigger months of delays, new filings, thousands of dollars in regulatory fees. And even if the licensing could somehow be handled, the tax consequences were brutal. Any shares given to Corey would be treated as a taxable gift from Rick Jr. We're talking potentially hundreds of thousands in gift taxes alone. A discounted sale might trigger IRS scrutiny too, especially with the show's royalties and intellectual property rights all tied to the business. Corporate counsel ultimately advised that adding Corey as an owner would require rewriting decades of contracts. Contracts with the History Channel, with lenders, with vendors, even with the city of Las Vegas itself. Behind closed doors, the conclusion was painful but unanimous. Keeping the ownership structure exactly as it was, 100% under Rick Jr., was legally safer, financially cleaner, operationally simpler. Corey wasn't excluded out of malice. He wasn't pushed aside because his work was undervalued. He was left out because the cost of changing the structure had grown too large to overcome. The system had hardened around him. For Corey, that explanation offered logic, but not comfort. He had put in the work. He had earned the trust. But the documents controlling the business didn't care about loyalty or sweat equity. They cared about signatures, dates, statutes, cold, hard legal reality. Even with all the legal and regulatory barriers in place, there was still one more layer shaping Corey's fate: the relationship between him and his older brother, Rick Harrison Jr. They grew up together in those aisles, patching floors, counting inventory, learning how to survive in a business where mistakes were expensive and customers could smell weakness from a mile away. But from childhood, their father, Rick Sr., trained them differently. Rick Jr. became the numbers guy, the analyst, the evaluator, the final voice on high-value deals. Corey became the operational backbone, the one who kept the shop running on a daily basis, the one staff depended on, the one fans connected with most. When Pawn Stars exploded in 2009, those roles hardened even more. Cameras captured the banter between them, the arguments, the teasing, the subtle hierarchy that existed in every exchange. Viewers often laughed when Rick Jr. pulled rank on his younger brother, but beneath every one of those exchanges, Corey knew the truth. His brother was the one being shaped for ownership. He was the one sitting next to Rick Sr. during big negotiations, the one absorbing all the legal and financial responsibilities that came with running a multi-million-dollar brand. Still, their bond never actually broke. Behind the scenes, they had long conversations, sometimes heated, sometimes emotional, about the future of the shop and Corey's place in it. Corey joked on social media about wanting a piece of the pie, but inside those jokes was real longing that he couldn't quite hide. In 2015, during a charity event at Red Rock Casino, he admitted publicly that ownership had never been promised to him, but he said he was grateful for the life the shop gave him. His voice cracked slightly when he said it. "I get to wake up every day doing exactly what I love. That's worth more than any piece of paper." But even gratitude can't fully erase desire. And as he watched Rick Jr. inherit the entire 100% ownership in 2018, Corey felt both pride and heartbreak at the same time. Pride that the business stayed in the family. Heartbreak that his decades of dedication and sacrifice wouldn't be reflected in any formal ownership stake. Yet, instead of resentment, Corey chose acceptance. His father's legacy mattered more to him than a stake certificate, and their family bond, tested by fame, tragedy, and public scrutiny, remained intact through all of it. But that acceptance carried a quiet ache, one that never fully disappeared no matter how much time passed. As the years went on, Corey's role inside the gold and silver pawn shop continued to evolve, not through ownership, but through influence. He chaired inventory meetings, approved major purchases, mentored new employees, became the public face of the shop alongside his father and brother. His compensation grew through performance bonuses, TV royalties, and licensing deals tied to the Big Hoss brand he'd built over the years. On paper, Corey remained an employee. In practice, he functioned like a partner, just one without a vote, without a stake, without any legal claim to the business. Privately, discussions started surfacing about whether Corey could ever receive a formal share. Attorneys laid out some creative possibilities: profit interest units that wouldn't trigger licensing complications, non-voting shares issued through a holding company, maybe even a trust-based structure that would grant Corey beneficiary rights without altering the shop's tightly regulated ledger look. These sounded promising, but each one came with its own maze of legal checks, tax implications, regulatory hurdles, and estate planning complexities that would take years to untangle. Behind all the legal talk was a simpler truth. Both brothers wanted the shop to remain united. Fragmented ownership could expose them to future disputes, government reviews, or licensing resets, and nobody wanted to jeopardize the business their father built from the ground up. Corey understood this more than anyone. He valued stability, family unity, the legacy of the Harrison name. But even with that understanding, there were moments, quiet ones, when he wondered what it would feel like to finally see his name on an ownership document. Moments when he questioned whether decades of loyalty and sacrifice should amount to more than just a salary and a title. But life has repeatedly taught Corey that nothing is simple. The DUI arrest in 2023, the heartbreaking loss of his younger brother Adam in 2024, and the constant pressure of fame, all of it forced him to rethink what truly mattered in the end. Ownership was important, but healing was more important. Stability was more important. Family was more important. Today, Corey remains the emotional anchor of the gold and silver pawn shop, beloved by fans, trusted by staff, respected by his brother. He may not hold legal ownership, but he holds something that can't be transferred, taxed, inherited, or signed away. He holds the shop's soul, and in many ways, that has become his form of ownership, one built not on paper, but on a lifetime of loyalty that no document could ever capture. Corey may never own the shop legally, but after everything he's given to it, maybe that's not even the point anymore.
Most people know Corey Harrison as Big Hoss, the loyal grandson who basically grew up inside the gold and silver pawn shop, the kid who turned into the shop's dependable manager and became a fan favorite on one of the most watched reality shows ever made. But here's something few people ever realized. Corey was never anywhere close to actually owning the place he devoted his entire life to, and that's not an exaggeration. As the years passed, he kept showing up, working harder, taking on every responsibility that got thrown his way. Meanwhile, legal documents and old family decisions were quietly shutting him out. By the time he learned the full truth, the business he helped build was already slipping out of his hands, and there wasn't much he could do about it. Corey's story begins long before Pawn Stars ever became a television phenomenon. He was born on April 27, 1983, to Rick Harrison and Kim Harrison. Came into the world just a few blocks from that small pawn shop that would one day become famous around the globe. His grandfather Richard, better known as the Old Man, and his grandmother Matilda opened the gold and silver pawn shop back in 1988. Simple structure, a 50-50 partnership between the two of them, no outside investors, no complicated ownership tree, just two people starting a business together. That decision, made long before Corey even understood what ownership or inheritance meant, would ultimately define the rest of his life. He just didn't know it yet. As a child, Corey practically lived inside that shop. He toddled past shelves stacked with gold ingots, vintage guitars, and casino artifacts left behind by gamblers chasing luck. By the time he was 9 years old, he was already helping with small tasks around the place, absorbing pawn business knowledge the same way most kids learn their multiplication tables. And when he got older, he didn't drift away like a lot of teenagers do. He doubled down instead, Long hours, managing inventory, slowly building the hard-earned trust of both Rick and the old man. This wasn't some kid killing time until something better came along. This was his life. But even as Corey grew into a cornerstone of daily operations, the ownership structure remained completely untouched. Rick Sr. still held his original 50%. Matilda still held hers. No shares were ever subdivided or reassigned, no trusts established, no inheritance plans drafted that included Corey anywhere in them. Years passed, seasons changed. Pawn Stars started filming in 2009, but the legal paperwork, it stayed frozen in the 1980s like nothing had ever happened. When Matilda passed away without a detailed will, her 50% stake legally defaulted back to her surviving spouse under Nevada intestacy law. That meant the old man ended up with everything, and Corey never had a chance, not even a theoretical one, to inherit any piece of her stake. Long before he realized what was happening, the path to ownership was already closing. The shop he loved would never legally belong to him, not because of anything he did wrong, but because of documents written decades before he even knew what equity was. As Corey entered adulthood, the gold and silver pawn shop became more than just a family business. It became his identity. By his early 20s, he was running day-to-day operations, overseeing more than 30 employees, negotiating high-value deals, managing the pressure that came with a shop suddenly thrust into worldwide fame. Pawn Stars premiered in 2009 and instantly transformed that quiet Las Vegas storefront into a global brand. Millions of viewers watched Corey grow from a hard-working kid into the reliable force behind the counter. His instincts were sharp, his decisions were quick. His ability to read customers made him indispensable to the whole operation. But while the cameras showed laughter and banter, Corey's real struggle was invisible to everyone watching at home. He assumed that his decades of loyalty would eventually be rewarded with formal ownership. He believed that one day his name would naturally join the list of legal partners. After all, he was the grandson who stayed, the one who joined the shop before he even hit double digits, the one who didn't walk away when success finally arrived. But behind the scenes, nothing ever changed. The partners remained the same, Rick Harrison and the old man. The legal structure stayed exactly where it was, because nobody ever went back to revisit those documents from when the shop was just another struggling Las Vegas business. In Season 7 of Pawn Stars, Corey finally cracked. He was frustrated, carrying more responsibility than anyone except his father, and he knew it. So he told Rick and the old man straight up that he deserved a 10% stake in the business. It was a bold move, a mix of desperation and hope all rolled into one conversation. But instead of the ownership he fought for, he got a compromise, a raise, and a promise of a 5% future stake. Sounds promising, right? Here's the problem. It never became legally binding. Nothing was put on paper, no signatures, no contracts, just words. To him, it was better than nothing. To viewers, it looked like progress. But in reality, it didn't change the paperwork, the deeds, the signatures, or the laws that controlled the business. Corey kept working harder, believing that patience would eventually deliver justice. He didn't know the full truth yet, that the shop's future ownership was already locked in ways he couldn't imagine. Then, in June 2018, everything Corey believed about his future changed in a single heartbreak. On June 25, 2018, Richard, the old man Harrison, passed away at age 77. He'd been battling Parkinson's disease for a long time. For Corey, it wasn't just the loss of a grandfather, it was the loss of the one person who had shaped his work ethic, his values, and his love for the pawn business. They'd spent 15 years working shoulder to shoulder, arguing, laughing, building a shop that millions of viewers would eventually adore. Losing him created a silence in that store that Corey could never fully fill. But the emotional blow was only the first blow. The second one came quietly, wrapped inside legal documents that had been finalized long before Corey ever thought to question them. The old man's estate plan was simple. Some people say too simple, actually. His 100% stake, including the portion he inherited from Matilda, went directly to Rick Harrison Jr. All of it, every single share. There were no special provisions for grandchildren, no carved-out percentages, no conditional shares, no inheritance plans drafted that included Corey anywhere in them. When this reality hit him, Corey realized something devastating. His decades of sweat, loyalty, and sacrifice had no legal weight whatsoever. His role remained exactly the same: manager, employee, television personality, but never owner. The decisions he helped enforce, the millions of dollars he negotiated, the responsibility he carried across all those seasons of filming, it was all built on trust, not ownership. At the same time, personal tragedies kept piling on. In 2024, his younger brother Adam died at just 39 from a fentanyl overdose. It sent Corey into another wave of grief he wasn't prepared for. He had barely recovered from losing the old man when life took another piece of his heart. And in 2023, a DUI arrest in Las Vegas damaged his public image and caused more tension inside the family. This was happening at a time when he was already emotionally drained from everything else. Through all of this, Corey kept showing up to work. He kept filming, he kept pushing forward. But deep down, he was beginning to understand a truth he never wanted to face. The shop he dedicated his whole life to could never truly belong to him. Not legally, and maybe not even symbolically. After the old man's passing, Corey assumed there might still be a chance, some legal door somewhere, a forgotten clause, maybe a backdated agreement that could give him even a fractional stake in the business. But the deeper attorneys dug into the foundation of the gold and silver pawn shop, the clearer it became. Corey's path to ownership was blocked by forces way more complicated than just family decisions.